Hello, everyone. This is Deb from Deb's Data Dojo and Calling All Beings. I'm here to introduce the UAP Medical Coalition and a few of its members. They have graciously agreed to join us for a Q&A session live on YouTube. Joining us today is Les Velez. Les is the co-founder and chairman of the board of Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. Les is also an author, a founding member of the UAP Medical Coalition, and the head of the mental health team at UAP Med. Ron is also here today. Ron is a PhD in sociology. He has a PhD in sociology. He's a professor, author, and member of the UAP Medical Coalition. He advises us on psychosocial aspects of the phenomenon. And last but not least is Ted Rowe. Ted is the director of UAP Med, but is best known for his work with AIAA and, of course, NARCAP. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you,
Hello.
Deb.
Hi. Thank you.
Okay, so today we have a lot of questions that we picked out from the audience, but before we get into questions, is there anything you'd like to say about UAP Med in general?
Well, we were established in response to changes in the understandings about unidentified aerial phenomena. And when the Office of the Director of National Intelligence acknowledged that UAP exists and cited three areas that they affect: national security, aviation safety, and stigma, it was clear that there are underserved populations in the mental health arena that need some attention now. So I reached out to Les and a number of other people around me and started trying to pull together an organization to help facilitate understanding with the community of professionals about unidentified anomalous phenomena.
So thank you very much. And Ted, the very first question is, what does UAP Med do?
Our mission at UAP Med is to inform the mental health and medical community of professionals about unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, to encourage research and to improve patient care. And that's it in a nutshell.
And Ted, what is UAP Med a business?
At this point, UAP Med would be considered an unincorporated association, or not even a nonprofit 501c3. Nobody's making any money here. We have no paid staff. All of our expenses are being met by our volunteers at this point.
Okay, this next question is for both Les and Ted. Okay. Who are the affiliates, and what does it mean to be an affiliate for UAP Med?
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I'll answer that question. Affiliates are people that are aligned with the way we are thinking, and certainly Opus is one of the organizations, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, that I co-founded with a doctor friend of mine years ago, 1994, and we are officially a nonprofit organization. But there's other organizations that we are also affiliated with. Project Bat Tech, which was going to be talked about by one of our other members, who unfortunately wasn't able to be with us this evening. But we're always looking for other organizations to be affiliated with that are of like mind. The bottom line on all of this is that we're trying to make the mental health, the medical community more aware of the phenomena that's going on, where people are talking about being in contact with non-human intelligences.
Did you want to add anything to that, Ted?
No, I think Les pretty well hit the high points there. The issue is that there are underserved populations. I ran NARCAP for 20 some years and dealt with pilots who had these unusual encounters while flying their aircraft during their professional careers. And it was clear that they suffer from issues around stigma, and that they have issues of trauma and anxiety that arise from these exposures. And it's very consistent with other subgroups that you read about in the literature who have these exposures.
Sorry.
And it's really time for us to go ahead and develop a response to that. We're acknowledging that the things exist. So now the next thing to do is understand how they affect individuals, how they affect society. And so we look for affiliates who are they're sort of we're a hub, and they're spokes who are actively engaged, and we try to support and work with them synergistically.
Thank you so much. And then the next question is a question that Ron and Les may both want to talk about, but we'll start with Ron. Is it aliens?
Well, I wish we really knew. Obviously, many of the people describe encounters with beings that seem like they must come from another planet, but we really don't know that. Others sometimes seem quasi-robotic, and obviously some encounters deal also with people who seem like people. So what are those? Well, the truth is we really don't know. We try to keep an open mind and hope that eventually we'll be able to solve that and answer that question.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in right after Ron there, thank you, Ron. The fact is that we're dealing with a multitude of entities, non-human intelligences. Um, we talk about time travelers. I mean, there's the Rendlesham Forest case where they were in contact with time travelers. Um, you have interdimensionals that are often talked about. Um, you have our military that can be a factor as well. And so there's a multitude of possibilities when it comes to talking about these non-human intelligences. And so I think we have to be open-minded about it, and being able to um, to understand that it's not one particular thing. It can be a multitude of different things.
I would just like to add something here also. The view with our organization is agnostic. We don't really know anything. What we're trying to do is gather enough information in one area so that people who have an interest in this from a professional side have some place to go to start gathering information. Perhaps they've heard about temporal effects and they've got a patient that is talking about this and they want to know more. So what does the literature have to say about people who claim to have these exposures and temporal effects? And hopefully we'll have some of those materials available for them. And there's a whole spectrum of these types of issues that come with the discussion of exposure to UAP that we need to find appropriate responses to. So, and we may learn that we are dealing with non-human intelligences. While that's unresolved, that there are a lot of people who are saying that's what's happening. So we're here in service.
Yeah, I think Ted, that the mission that UAP Med has come up with, I think, is very, very positive, very significant, because since the government has come out now and said that UAPs are real, and that they're not the Russians and not the Chinese and they're not ours, so then what are they? That's a significant question. But that then it opens up the door to the next logical question: is then what are these people that claim to be experiencing these non-human intelligence dealing with? Are they extraterrestrial? Are they interdimensional? Are they time travelers? Are they the military? Or are they all the above? And so there needs to be a concerted effort in the mental health and the medical community to really start to scientifically analyze this, and to try to help these people, because, and we're going to get into this, I think, a little bit later on, that these people are not crazy. They do not have a psychopathology. So then what? And a lot of them have gone to psychologists or psychiatrists and found out that they're perfectly sane. So then what? What's the next step?
Okay, actually, the next question is one that I think I would like all of you to take a turn to answer. And it is, what does it mean to be an experiencer? And what are some of the indicators of being an experiencer? Who would like to start with that one?
Well, I'll take the ball and run with it. You know, an experiencer, the terminology is come about of late. It used to be called abductees. And then, of course, people got upset with that because a lot of people were having positive experiences, not just negative experiences. So then we had the phrase contactee that came about. And now, of course, it's morphed into experiencers. And so what is an experiencer? These are people that talk about the fact that they've had some kind of contact, and there's been evidence of that contact, whether it's marks on the body, implants, things of that nature. And so it's very significant that and we did a study with MUFON back in 2010, um, where we took 71 experiencers and 51 people as a control group. And the first thing we found out was none of these people had a psychopathology, and they were not fantasy prone. And so there's been some significant things happening with these people, and so you can't ignore it. And then the majority of the people, and there's been other subsequent studies. The free study came out with this, and then uh, there's been a couple of other studies that have come up with the fact that like 70 to 80% of the people are having positive experiences. And so there's a small minority that are having negative experiences. And those are the people that need the help that organizations like Opus can help with, and other organizations as well.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Would you want to go next, Ron? Oh, Ted wants to go. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I'll give Ron the closing line on this because he's quite the expert. Experiencer to me is somebody with exposure to unidentified aerial phenomena in an unambiguous way. And it might be a close observation of an object that appears to be a device, or it might be an observation of occupants of such a device. I tend to refer to as exposure rather than experiencer. Because a lot of times it's really hard to understand just what happened. The incidents that can be quite sterile, and you can project on them and walk away feeling like you've either been touched by God or chased by devils, and it's really all in your head because the incident happens regardless. So I come to this as an experiencer, as somebody with exposure. It's happened all my life. I wouldn't be involved in any of the things that I do if I didn't have a pretty direct look at all of this, and wasn't significantly moved by it. And that said, a lot of us have that same level of resolve. So now it's time to look and see, are we crazy or not? I don't think we are. And I'd like to be part of the solution to understanding this issue.
No, that's a good way to look at it, Ted. I think that instead of saying an experiencer, but someone being in, having that exposure to the topic, to the entity, to the object. That's a good defining point. Actually, I never really thought about it in those terms, but that's a great comment.
And also, I think neither of us have really mentioned that it can make a significant impact on a person's life.
Yes,
It can cost you friends. It can cost you jobs. It can put you at odds with your beliefs. A lot of damage can come of these things. So what we need is to really bore into this and understand it and figure out how to be of help and service to those demographics that are suffering from these issues.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Ron, can you add a little bit to that about what you think it means for someone to be an experiencer?
Sure. So I have some letters that were written to Bud Hopkins some years ago, and I've been looking through these letters and so forth. And for many people, the missing time aspect is the thing that makes them think that, well, hey, they might have been abducted. And so people try to put together from their own experience what might have happened and so forth. They look for people who can give them more information. It's actually very terrifying to have things happen that are unexpected and then not have anybody that you can go to ask the question, what's going on here? You know? So a lot of times, Dave Jacobs told me the person remembers things that really didn't happen, but they know that something happened. And sometimes it's only under hypnosis that whatever the person experienced comes out. And often people remember things under hypnosis that are quite different than the things that they consciously remember. But the basic point is that here is something where people are trying to figure out what happened to them. And so the idea of UAP Med essentially is to provide a sort of safe encounter with the medical, the psychiatric profession, so that people can actually say to whoever is trying to help them, here's what happened to me. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but I'm kind of concerned about this, and I've been experiencing the following effects, and here's what they are. And I think the problem with the therapeutic community is often they have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to anybody that has unusual experiences. So we're trying to get away from the knee-jerk reaction and asking the therapeutic community to consider this might be something that a lot of other people have experienced too. Here are the signs. Here's what you can expect. And, there's a lot of different narratives here, but the thing they share in common is something happened that was way out of the ordinary for them.
Okay, and the next question I have is going to be for Liz. Liz, how are experiencer rights protected?
Before we go into that, I saw a question that just popped up. Are we planning to try to educate providers? And the answer is yes. This is going to be an outreach program where we try to give them as much information as we can to educate them on these things that are going on with these people, and that these people, the vast majority are absolutely free of any psychopathology. And so then the big question is, so what is going on with them? And so this is something definitely that is part of our mission, is to educate the mental health and the medical community on these types of things. Now, as far as what was the question again, Deb? Shoot that
It's
again.
about protections
Oh yeah.
basically for the
Okay. Yeah.
experiencer because they so often come
Hmm.
forward and offer their story and end up
Right.
as part of research.
One of the things that is very important to us as UAP Med and also as Opus is that we try to adhere as much as possible to HIPAA types of processes. Um, and we caution these people when they come in, and they volunteer to come in to us, and to caution them about how much they want to tell people about. Uh, and then as far as types of things that may be going on with them from a mental health type of a situation, that we might be able to then point them in the right direction for the appropriate help. Whether it's a support group, whether it's a mental health type of a person that could who is familiar with the phenomena, which is very important. The affiliation that we have with Opus is very important because they do have an online support group, which is totally confidential, international, and they also have a referral network of vetted uh, mental health and hypnotherapists that are familiar with the topic. And then they have a triage group called the EST, which is the experiencer support team that talks to these people to find out what they're looking for. So these are very important. But the overarching thing that is so important to our organization as well as Opus is the confidentiality of these people. We respect that. The only way that we would ever talk about these people, let's say as an example, would be with their permission. And so that is in writing, by the way. So this is something that is so important to us because a lot of these people just, they don't want this information out there because of the fact that the way society tends to look at these people. I mean, some of them can't talk to their family members, they can't talk to their coworkers, they can't talk to their clergy. It's sad in a way that they're so isolated. So being able to put them into a support group, if you will, to have them understand that they're not alone, that there are other people having similar types of experiences is so vitally important to them.
Thank you. And in case someone were to stumble on this stream and not be so familiar with the topic, we're going to address some semantics issues that people may need some help with. So, Ted, can you please explain what UAP means?
Well, sure. Originally, it meant unidentified aerial phenomena. My organization, NARCAP, introduced it in 1999, and we offered it as an alternative to UFO because I was fronting for a team of engineers and scientists, and we had to protect their reputations. And frankly, you get laughed out of the room if you brought up the word UFO, but you could say UAP, and it gave just enough flex to the group that they could talk about it. So eventually, it went viral, and everybody started using it. But originally, Dr. Richard Haynes defined it in 1980 as a proper noun with a definition. And we introduced it in 1999. It went viral. Now everybody uses it. The current version of it is unidentified anomalous phenomena. And that was due to a change announced on January 11th by the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office at the Pentagon. So they offered a new name and a new definition. So that's where we're at currently with it. Hopefully we'll figure out enough about these things to stop calling them unidentified and identify them as something.
I vote we just call them AP. That's my vote, everyone. It's redundant to call them unidentified anomalous. But um,
Right.
I also wanted, if you can elaborate on what Arrow is doing a little bit.
Well, sure. Right now, they're in the process of developing reporting systems across the federal government so that they can develop channels of reporting and acquire data to do analysis. They're developing memorandum of understanding with several different civilian organizations that have strong technical skill to bring to the table. And they're also partnering with NASA. NASA also has a UAP studies group engaged at the moment, which might lead to some research. So, yeah.
And that just sort of goes to show you, anyone who's listening, how important this topic actually is at this moment in time and has been for thousands of years. Okay, Ron, you're up next to answer the question. Okay.
Okay.
Who do UFOs and UAPs impact?
Okay. So obviously, these things have an effect on the society that we're part of. I think I wanted to add something on to what Ted said. And I think part of this is that even though the military and much of the scientific community is willing to talk about the unidentified objects in the sky, when it comes down to abductions or whatever you want to call them, experiences, there's something left out. And so here we're dealing with people who've had experiences that really are not being invited essentially by the government and the scientific groups basically to talk about what's happened to them. So the problem is that in many cases, the experiencer is essentially left alone instead of being invited to the community of people who have seen things they're often put to one side. So I think that's one of the things that UAP Med is to do, essentially, is to take these people and put them in the mainstream and say, well, hey, this happens to all kinds of people. And that's what we've learned. We've learned it happens to an enormous number of people. And so we are trying to get away from the stigma attached to this. I think that's certainly one of the major goals of UAP Med, is to get rid of the stigma and say, okay, these are people who have had experiences that are common, and we know how common they are by looking at the surveys that we've done. And so what we'd like to do essentially is to welcome these people to the fold and say, okay, you've had these experiences, so, let's see if we can deal with your whatever those experiences are. If it's traumatic, we'll deal with that. If it's otherwise, we'll deal with that. So I think that's the key, is to offer people a way to join the mainstream and to have mainstream people see them as having experiences that are real.
If you can you please explain to anyone who may not understand the stigma, what the stigma has been about, and what stigma might be, so on and so forth?
Well, I think basically stigma is something that makes you different than other people. Nobody really wants to be different. They don't want to be counted out. They don't want to be pushed aside. And often people who have been called abductees or experiencers are people who've been pushed aside. They are not accepted into the group of people who are, if you will, UFO sighters or UAP sighters. So I think it's, our job is clear, that we need to provide a sort of safe path into the therapeutic community for people who need help with trauma. We need to provide a safe path for people who want to talk about these experiences, rather than seeing them as something that's weird or dissident. We want people to see this as something that happens to people from time to time. And so we need to be able to allow people to talk about these events.
Okay, does anyone want to add anything further on some of the stigma that people have experienced before we move on to the next question? Okay, Ted?
Sure. This issue of stigma is really important. It's stalled our conversation on this subject for 70 years. It has been part of a psychological operation that's had a number of aspects to it. Some of it's coordinated, some of it just kind of happens spontaneously around the topic. And now we find ourselves 70 years behind the 8 ball going, wait a minute, these things are real. And if they're real and we see them doing X, Y, and Z, what else are they doing? And then we have this whole battery of people, myself included, that have something to say about that. And it's clear that the system's been remiss, that the logic and rationale hasn't been there. For example, I get pilot reports. Well, if the UAP data comes in to the aviation system, it leaves the aviation system for places unknown, and then the pilots aren't supported. The aviation safety matters aren't addressed. The information itself, even though it's right there showing aviation safety issues, is not addressed for what it is. And we run into this over and over again with this subject. We've got people who are traumatized. We have people who are damaged, and we have incredulous care providers. People that really aren't ready to serve somebody that's had that kind of exposure, or people that would like to and don't know how. And so here we are. We're a little ahead of the curve because we're still in the resolution process of developing definitive data on UAP. And as that arises from commonly accepted scientific sources, then we're going to need to be looking at these people, and we're going to need to have these organizations like UAP Med in place to help facilitate that process. So here we are.
Okay, so we got a question from the chat. They want to know, will this information and work be shared, at least potentially, with Congress?
Yes.
I did you nod, Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. We do intend to have congressional outreach. We're still fairly new in developing our outreach and internal processes, but yeah, that's definitely on our calendar. Advocacy is part of our process.
Okay, so actually, I wanted to go backwards a little bit on something you said. You said that UAP are real. Can you please elaborate as to why we know they are in fact real at this point in time?
Well, in 2020, a task force was convened by Congress to audit the U.S. government on UAP related information. And then it reported back to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, who then issued a report about it. And in it, they cited that there had been multi-sensor detections of objects with clearly daunting technical signatures, and that they were very concerned that they didn't know who these things belonged to, and that they might represent breakthrough technologies, and that they clearly were a threat to aviation safety, all based on government and military data. They hadn't looked into the commercial data, which is what my group at NARCAP had championed for years. And so that's kind of where they're at right now. They're not ready to say that they're aliens, but they're very ready to say they're here, and they're digging deep to find out what that means. And we have congressional committees engaged. We have the National Defense Authorization Act has had language in it for the last 3 years, controlling how things are going to go and how they're funded and how whistleblowers will be treated, and so on. So the society is in reaction right now, and the U.S. government's kind of in the lead. So knowing that, and knowing that, like in my work at NARCAP, I've got pilot reports dating back to 1916. So it's over 100 years of pilot anecdotes and occasionally instrument-supported observations of unidentified aerial phenomena. And those phenomena remain the same. The reports are the same across the decades while our own aircraft evolved. So there are a number of indicators that say we should look much closer to that. And that was much of the work at NARCAP, was to advocate for engagement by the scientific community and the government on this issue. And just recently, we found out that Aero, the director of Aero, Dr. Kirkpatrick, presented to the National Transportation Research Board on January 11th about UAP reporting and civil aviation. And in it, he cited just about everything NARCAP ever stood for as being an issue and something they wanted to work on. So I'm sensing the trend in all of this, and I'm suggesting that we get ready. And I belong to, I work with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. We have a whole team of mostly mainstream scientists and engineers, and they're very interested in what's going on. But at some point, this information could become toxic, and I'm worried that they're not supported. And that's why I want to be here. That's why I want this group in place, is to be able to help. As people learn more about this, there's going to be some coping issues, and the mental health and medical community need to be ready for them.
And I also wanted to point out that in our meetings, we keep up to date as much as we can on what's been going on. For anyone who's interested, the ODNI recently put out a report about basically threats, as they do annually, and probably more often than that. And they mentioned something called anomalous health incidents in that report. So if anyone wants to take a look, the government is paying attention, and they have different names for it, and that makes it a little tricky to FOIA. But anyone who has looked into OSAP also would have noticed that they were paying attention to the physical and mental health issues related to the phenomenon. Okay, so my next question is for Ron. So Ron, as we said, OSAP and the ODNI definitely have indicated that they've been researching this topic. In fact, some of the people from the government have come out and said that they've been part of research. So do scientists and physicians study UAPs and experiencers?
Well, they do, and I think the studies of experiencers have essentially been done mostly by the private community. It's difficult to get scientists to admit that there are experiencers, and so that's one of the things that we'd like to change. Um, it's been interesting to see that the government is happy to look at things that are going on over strategic air command bases or over the sea with aircraft carriers and so forth. But what about the people who have had contact with what appear to be occupants or uh, pilots of these craft? What about those people? Well, often those people are put off to one side. I think the stuff that Ted is doing is really admirable, and I'm absolutely impressed by the seriousness with which all that's being checked out. But at the same time, we who have experiences, I'm not actually an experiencer myself, but I have lots of friends who are experiencers. They need a place to be able to come. They need a chance to become subjects of research. They need a chance to get their problems addressed. And I think that's actually where UAP Med comes in, is that we are going to stand essentially as the voice of those people to the extent that we can and try to get the therapeutic community to take a different look at this.
Thank you very much. And speaking of someone who works very hard to provide therapeutic services to experiencers, Liz, can you please tell me if someone should be treated differently, if a client or patient should be treated differently, if they've witnessed or experienced a UAP, had an encounter with a UAP? Should they be getting different tests and assessments?
Yeah, the simple answer is no. And what's really interesting in my initial investigations a number of years ago, I was a field investigator for MUFON. And almost without exception, the cases that I got involved with were not only sightings, but then people talked about the fact that they had contact with non-human intelligences. So it's hard to break those two apart. And so therefore, you really don't want to do anything different other than the fact that you need to talk to these people and understand what it is that they need, what it is that they're looking for. A lot of them basically would just like to be in a support group to talk to other people about their experiences. Some of them then want to find out a little bit more about their experiences by utilizing a hypnotherapist. Um, and of course, a lot of times we advise them that, you know, you have to be very sure if you want to do that type of a therapy, because you may find out something that you might not like. And as they say, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to put it back in. Uh, so, you know, these are the kind of things that one has to consider. And uh, being able to give them what it is that they want. And then a lot of times these people have PTSD, and they definitely need to sit down with a mental health practitioner. And so that's why I think the being able to talk to these people, truly understand what their situation is so important, and and then be able to point them in the right direction. And of course, during this whole process, to keep the confidentiality is tantamount to working with these people.
So, can you elaborate again on whether or not experiencers are mentally ill?
Well, it doesn't mean just because you are mentally ill that you cannot have an experience. You could. That's a distinct possibility. But I think I mentioned this earlier, the omega-3 study that was done in conjunction with MUFON in 2010. We had 71 people that were claimed to be experiencers and 51 people that were a control group. And nobody in that whole group had any psychopathology. And they did not have fantasy proneness or anything of that nature. Their worldview changed very much afterwards. And we did find that there was childhood trauma in a lot of the cases of some sort. which cause them to dissociate in a way that not, and again, a psychopathological way, but a way to handle the situation, to be able to get through the experience. When I said their worldview change, I mean, most of these people come back with the idea that we need to be better stewards of the planet. We need to be better to one another. We need to have more love for one another, as opposed to all these wars that we're fomenting, seemingly year after year. It's a really interesting process that these people are going through, and some of them are able to come through it fairly quickly. Others, it takes a long, long time to be able to process what has transpired, because it is a world shattering, traumatic experience that these people go through. All of them, no matter if it turns out to be a good experience or a negative experience, the first stage of this process is quite traumatic. And so it's something that we need to be cognizant of when dealing with these people, to be a neutral place, to let them talk their talk, and then understand what's the next step for them.
Okay, so the next question was originally
Well,
going to.
Ted has his hand up.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry, Ted. Go ahead.
yeah, I wanted to say too that um, experiencers aren't necessarily mentally ill because they've had experiences, but they can sure look like it. Um, I was absolutely dysfunctional for decades, and I was the last to know. Um, General anxiety disorder, um, post traumatic stress disorder. Turns out it's CPTSD, um, because all this goes back, and families involved, and then unrelated issues of family are involved, um, and so the ability to cope and function becomes really challenging. People deal with this daily anxiety and hypervigilance in different ways, and they may not look well, they may not seem well. When I know I've ruined my share of Thanksgiving dinners, you know babbling about this stuff, and it took a while to get to the point where I could manage it. It took a lot of personal work, and I did have the help of therapists, and I did go through EMDR, and I went through other types of anxiety training to help me cope with it. So, and in the meantime, it was hard on relationships, it was hard on jobs, it was hard on a lot of things. Uh, you could almost say that my work in ufology was a symptom of my exposure. So it can be deeply, it can affect you deeply. It can change everything, and not in a good way. It's a struggle. You're not in control. There's something out there. There are times when you don't want to go outside and look up, and there are people who've been carrying this load all their lives, while being ridiculed by family, being disrespected, and that's part of the reason why we're here now, is to try and push that back, move in another direction, start working on acceptance and engagement and help, service.
I think I'm going to also add acknowledgement, because there was a time, and if anyone has done any research and read some of the historic books, when just talking about experiencers was not happening. It was ignored. The files and reports that involved encounters with some kind of entity were tossed. So this is a different time where we're actually acknowledging this issue now. So Les, this question I'm going to send to you. This
Mhm.
next question is there a benefit to reporting to MUFON or other organizations about experiences?
Well, I think a lot of times that MUFON now has an organization called the ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team. Um, these are people that do kind of a triage as well when people come to MUFON and are looking for help in regards to their experiences. They also have a referral network of hypnotherapists, and some mental health practitioners as well. So it really depends. I mean, MUFON has such a great outreach right now as far as an organization. I mean, they've been around since 1969, and they've they just were recently on Ancient Aliens and talking about the organization. So they're pretty well known. So all I can say is that it's another group, and we have gotten people to come back our way to Opus after maybe working with MUFON, but all I can say is that I think they're probably doing a fairly good job, because we've only had a very few people come back our way, having dealt with MUFON, the ERT group, that is. As far as field investigators are concerned, I don't have any information on that in that regard, whether or not there's positive feedback after working with a field investigator, because the way they're organized right now, and I'm also a member of the ERT as a consultant, so being transparent here, and the people that the field investigator first gets the case, and then if it's necessary, they bring in an ERT member. And there's been some fallout in the past here with regard to confidentiality issues, uh, when the headquarters was requiring that a lot of this information was to be put into reports. And so, of course, this was anathema to these people working in the ERT group, as far as being able to keep all that information confidential, because, of course, the experiencers don't want this information out there.
It's worth adding also that UAP Med does not collect that information. We're a coalition, so if someone's doing that research, they might be affiliated with us, but we ourselves do not take those reports.
Go ahead, Ted.
I would add one other benefit to making reports to either NUFORC or MUFON, is that there's a lot of data mining going on right now, and they're applying AI to it. And if you want to make sure that your data points from your experience contribute to the knowledge about these experiences, then consider contributing your story to either MUFON or NUFORC. And you don't have to use your name, of course, but the information that's in those reports, and may coordinate with other reports, and then it becomes an understanding. And that's a way you can contribute without necessarily making yourself vulnerable. So that's another benefit to making reports.
Yeah, and let me just add too that they corrected that situation within the ERT, so that's not an issue anymore.
Nice.
Okay, the next question is basically, where can people go to get more information on the statistics and data related to the UAP phenomenon and encounters? That's for you and Ron, so both of you can give input.
Okay, I'll go first, I guess. There are a lot of resources for information about UAP, and more developing all the time. And if you take a look at some of the data mining efforts that are going on, like I just mentioned, you're going to see more information arising. There are new groups and teams coming on every day, and including professional organizations, actual companies that are starting to dig into this. And that's just on the domestic side. If you go internationally, you can look to international government UAP research teams like CNES, GPAN in France, or CIRCE, which is another organization that looks at paranormal exposures, and they're in France. And there's more coming on all the time. Würzburg University, one of their professors teaches a class on UAP. It's the only one in Germany, and probably the only one in Europe. And he's going to be presenting at an aviation conference this summer. But that's we're in the infancy here. This is in the development stage. So finding this kind of information is a challenge for everybody. It's part of the reason why we're consolidating it or on our own website through the UFO connector.
Yeah, I think for the ordinary person, probably the resources that are quite valuable are the UFO handbooks. Jerome Clark has written several UFO handbooks, and a lot of them are very accessible. For instance, in this a book called The UFO Book by Jerome Clark, there is the first section virtually is about experiencers, and it cites Thomas Bullard's studies, which have been very good, and you can see lots of statistics about how experiencers have where were they abducted and so on and so forth. So I think there really is a wealth of handbooks that you can look at about these things. You don't have to look at the government resources. You can look at things that you can go find in the public library, and there's lots of statistics about who's seen a UAP and what percentage of them turn out to be real unexplained events. The interesting thing is there probably are as many experiencers as there are people who are genuine witnesses of unidentified aerial objects. And I think a lot of people need to tune into that fact. This is my personal opinion, but it's considering that there's lots of people who report things in the skies, most of them turn out to be ordinary things. On the other hand, UAP things tend to be, for the most part, upon investigation, have a strength, have a reality, and that reality is also things that people bear on their bodies, scars and things like that, occasionally implants. And often we find that if we look at experiencers as a group, there are cases where groups have experienced essentially contact with apparently non-human entities who are intelligent. I think you need to realize that many of these encounters are things that happen in groups, and it's not just a lone individual.
And it's also not sleep paralysis. 2/3 of all the cases, whether in a bedroom or not, do not involve sleep paralysis. So
Yeah.
some of the statistics, or false memory syndrome, is something that the debunkers like to talk about. The American Sociological Association or any other mainstream psychological diagnostic system has either ratified or proven such a diagnostic. So, I mean, there is something going on, folks, and there is a lot of information out there.
You
There's a lot of good books. Yeah.
you can
Yeah,
also
go ahead.
do. I'm sorry.
No,
Les.
go ahead.
You can also do searches of the white paper repositories like Archivex and some of the others, ResearchGate, and find stacks of papers on all aspects of UAP phenomena where people they haven't been able to get them into journals, but they've certainly managed to get them stored where they can be seen if you search them. So
Absolutely.
another resource.
I don't know, Deb, at the end here, are we going to be able to say our final words, if you will?
Oh, absolutely. But before we
Okay.
do that, I would like us to add one more question if we can. If we could just each of us share some of the medical and mental health effects of an encounter with a UAP. The list is quite extensive. We're definitely not going to get to all of them, but if you could just throw some of them out there so people are aware of some of the issues that we're actually dealing with.
Well, as far as physical aspects, I mean, people talk about nosebleeds. They talk about surgery type scars that heal incredibly quickly. You have puncture marks. You have scoop marks. You have triangular dots on the body. You have implants. I just saw there was a show on called the Alaska Aliens. It's a brand new series on the Travel Channel, and they had a doctor up there remove an implant, and this thing was transmitting. And so uh, and they had the device to test that. And as soon as they took it out of his body, it stopped transmitting. And so there's a plethora of proof that's out there that people seem to ignore for whatever reason. I mentioned paralysis. Yes, that does occur. Headaches, um, and vision issues. And then a lot of these in the most recent book that came out, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they talk about autoimmune type diseases that have been created by contact with the orbs and things of that nature.
Do
I
you want to
would,
add more, Ted?
sure, I would throw into that temporal effects, perception of time being altered, um, the perception of it, or literally being altered, burns, um, radiation type exposures. Uh, and then on top of that, add the mental health markers, high anxiety. Um,
Fear.
yeah, yeah. And hey, they're trying to tell you, you know,
Hmm.
chase me home, um, all of that's a pretty good indicator you're dealing with something that's probably not um, conventional. And and then the other side of it is how they're being treated by people around them. I think that's indicative also. One thing I've noticed is most of the exposures I've had, I wasn't alone, but I'll tell you, we're not friends anymore. It's the kind of thing that people go away when it happens, and I think there's something to that. That
It's a repression of the incident. That's basically what it is that they don't want to have a memory of it. And if that person reminds you of that experience, that's the last thing you want to have happen. Uh,
makes
we,
sense.
ju- we just had a discussion with one of our doctors in our group that just recently came in, talking about the fact that working with a patient that he mentioned something and it caused the person to shut down. And what it was that he said, who knows? Because he didn't even know what it was. But
Mm,
there are cases like that where a reminding a person of something will cause them to totally shut down or run the other way.
yeah, yeah. All of a sudden, they aren't on my phone anymore.
Yeah. Thank you for keeping me on your phone, Ted.
Yeah. Well, yeah. At least at least we still admit it happened. For crying
Yeah.
out loud.
Okay.
Okay. Ron, did you want to add anything to that list? It's quite extensive. Like I said, I don't think we're going to get
Yes.
to all the. Okay, go ahead.
I think that for me, the thing that I notice is hypervigilance is
Mm,
that basically, if you're an experiencer, you tend to scan all around you. And it also is a great disturber of sleep. A lot of people, and I mean, I base this on my own experience with experiencers, is that have a great deal of difficulty going to sleep at night. A lot of them are day sleepers, basically, because feels safer to them. Um, and obviously, there's a whole bunch of things that become taboo, or as you say, or become triggers for remembering these things, and so they stay away from those things.
hmm
I've
Absolutely.
had I've had several people, different people, tell me that they tie themselves to the furniture or to their spouses at night.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
That's that is something that hopefully. Yeah, I had a case one time where a woman was requested her husband to lay on top of her to protect her at night. So it's like
fear.
really, yeah, so that she couldn't be taken.
Yeah. Well, that
Yeah,
hypervigilance issue is really important. I agree with Ron. It's why you stick with the topic. You never get far from thinking about it. You never get far from talking about it. You never get far from looking around. Get a constant kick in your neck.
Yeah.
Don't sleep. Uh,
there's one more thing that I would like to mention before we sign off here, and that is families.
Mhm.
Uh, let's realize that if the parents are experiencers, the kids are likely experiencers too. How do parents deal with that? How should society deal with that? How do they talk to their friends? Can they talk to their friends about it? It's a big deal.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
most cases, no, they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are this
Go
is
ahead.
another of those underserved subgroups,
Mhm.
families with children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the family is part of this. I mean, we live in a society where family is a very, very important thing. And if anything disturbs the peace of the family, this is something that's going to be traumatic. It's going to be disturbing to people. It's nice to know that most experiencers have a good time, but a lot of times families don't have a good time with this subject. And I've certainly dealt with experiencers whose kids are definitely experiencers themselves. I remember a husband and wife who would lie awake at night, and then they would hear steps coming down the hall, and then their partner would disappear, and they couldn't move.
Mhm.
Terrifying. Okay,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do you deal with that? I don't know how you deal with that. To tell the truth.
It's
So
difficult. It's difficult at best. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So but families are a big part of this stuff.
Yeah.
They are.
Well, we have a lot of work to do, and it would be much appreciated if the professional community that deals with our clients and patients was paying attention to these issues. I have always said it doesn't matter if you believe or not, you need to treat the symptoms. So hopefully they'll be aware that there are symptoms that need that care. So I think in ending, we're going to go ahead and let you guys say some last things and let people know where they can find you. I'll let you go
Okay.
first, Ron.
Well, I'm a professor at Eastern Michigan University, and I can always be contacted basically via the university. I just want to say that I really appreciate being part of UAP Med, and I think we're doing a good job, and we will definitely try to change the parameters of the system so people can get the therapy that they need.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Les Velez here, and created this organization back in '94 called OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, with our mission basically to help people having paranormal experiences, which includes not only experiencers having contact with non-human intelligences, but other aspects of the paranormal. Um, you know, we have affiliated ourselves with UAP Med, and I'm one of the members of the group here, and I thank Ted for inviting me in to the group. I think this group has a lot of potential. We're in the beginning stages, as Ted has said, but we're going to be here to help not only the experiencer, but also trying to get the providers, the mental health community, and the medical community to understand that something real is going on. And then also, and this is my a plug for those, I wrote a book called The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact, which talks a lot about what we've talked about tonight and has a lot more detail in it. So if you have, it's on Amazon. And so thank you, Ted. Thank you, Deb. And thank you, Ron. Really appreciate being here tonight.
Hi, everybody. Ted Rowe. We're in our beginning states, as Les has mentioned, and there's much more to come. We're looking towards gathering a roundtable of mental health professionals to sort of make some sausage on camera so that we can talk a little bit about, see where the conversation goes amongst professionals. And that should be coming up in a month or so. Keep an eye out for us. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook. And if anybody needs to reach me, you can reach out to me or reach out to Deb. And I try to respond to most everybody as I can. I have quite a schedule these days, which which is new to me. So yeah, feel free to reach out at any point. I can be reached through the narcap.org website, also through the contact us mechanism on that page.
Yeah, one last thing here. Sorry, guys. If you want to reach me, you just go to opusnetwork.org. Opusnetwork.org. Thanks.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for coming and listening to this talk about UAP Medical Coalition. We have a website which we put below, uapmed.org. The link to the UAP Med forum and several of our social media sites are on that website. And of course, anyone is welcome to come and contribute to research and information that can be used to educate the medical and mental health professionals that are dealing with experiencers. So thank you again, and everyone, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.